The Brotherhood of Steel ends up being a poster boy for most of Fallout's media. But there's much more to the armored faction than just looking cool. I'm Mark from Digital Dissection. I make Fallout lore videos, and today we go back to the beginning of one of Fallout's oldest organizations, how they formed, and changes over the last 200 years of its existence. Warning, there will be spoilers ahead for Fallout's video game and TV series. To tell the Brotherhood's story, we need to begin with a man by the name of Roger Maxson. A captain in the United States Army, Maxson was sent with a detachment led by Colonel Robert Spindle to protect and monitor progress at West Tech's research facilities southeast of Los Angeles, eventually moving to the newly constructed Mariposa military base on January 7, 2077. Maxson was a veteran of the resource wars over worldwide fossil fuels, and the highly capable soldier was now placed into protecting research that he'd know very little about. By October of 2077, however, this would quickly change, as the soldiers soon discovered what they were truly providing security for: mutant research that spawned from West Tech's Pan-Immunity Virion project, research that had once been to combat a mysterious plague in Fallout's universe, but now was directly involved with the forced evolutionary virus. The virus, of course, would go on to create major mutations across the entire United States, including super mutants amongst many other nightmarish possibilities. But Maxson's outfit witnessed the already horrific experimentation being performed on humans, and began their next move: disavowing the US government. When word broke out that West Tech scientists were using humans for highly questionable tests, the military detachment under the leadership of Colonel Spindle quickly fell apart, as Spindle himself suffered a mental breakdown, and his soldiers demanded justice for the atrocities they were unknowingly keeping safe. Roger Maxson would take over as de facto leader, but prevented his direct reports from killing the scientists initially. He'd interrogate Chief Researcher Robert Anderson, but would learn the full extent of the connections between the scientists and their orders. In a quote taken directly from Maxson's own personal diary,
"I killed a man today. I was interrogating Chief Scientist Anderson, and he was giving me the full details of their inhuman experiments. He said his orders came from the government, but I didn't buy it. He started screaming about how he was following orders, how he was a military man, and I just shot him. I tell myself it was to keep from causing a full mutiny among the men, but I'm not so sure."
Even with trying to seek the truth, Maxson began to see what reality was: that the US government was up to no good, and it was impacting his own sanity. By October 20th, 2077, the Mariposa Army soldiers under Maxson's leadership officially deserted from the United States Army via a radio transmission. Only 3 days before Fallout's bombs fell, their secession from duty went largely unnoticed, and the government itself was already in hiding. Maxson had the forethought to move the families of his soldiers into the Mariposa military facility, and only days later the Great War would occur. Fortunately for them, the Mariposa facility would shield its inhabitants from the impact of nuclear devastation. By October 27, 2077, Maxson and the remaining group would leave the base for good, under a planned journey to reach the Lost Hills bunker, a government security bunker Maxson had the location of. Armed with T-51 power armor, the soldiers began a long journey with their families in tow. Within only a few days of the Great War, they faced marauders and raiders along the way, leading to the deaths of many women and children. By the end of the journey, Maxson lost his wife to the violence, and the faction had already split in two, with one group breaking off to seek out the West Tech research facility under command of Sergeant Dennis Allen, who split off from their caravan in search of advanced technologies that might still be there. Technology, however, would become the focus for the young Brotherhood, and Maxson spent years formulating what would come next: preserving technology and documentation of the old world, as well as preventing humanity from controlling the very tools that caused the world's destruction.
So tonight, as we break bread together, let us forge together something new, something strong, something we can be proud of.
Arthurian legend would serve as a foundation for Roger Maxson's Brotherhood, implementing a series of roles, responsibilities, and organizational structure throughout its ranks. At its highest position are elders, but its military features initiates, squires, knights, and paladins. Its researchers are known as scribes, which include the Order of the Shield and the Order of the Sword, focusing on power armor and weapons research respectively. Its Order of the Quill, however, is based on historical research and documentation cataloging. A sense of order, however, is a major part of the organization worth looking closer at, as its ranks are held together by pillars of militant design, yet at times can feel equally quasi-religious. Roger Maxson, of course, was a soldier, so part of this makes sense. But the introduction of a cult-like obedience to its charter took root at an undetermined point. Adoption of Latin terms and speech is prevalent across Fallout's Amazon Prime series, but was retconned in as it was not originally part of the video games until Fallout 4. Within the first Fallout games, the Brotherhood largely serves out a purpose as a protagonist, assisting the player character in dealing with the super mutants at the Mariposa military base, and the looming threat of the Enclave, the remnants of the US government. While this may seem like an extension of helping push the narratives of these games, it's actually much more aligned with the charter of the Brotherhood itself. Outside of its core pillar of acquiring technology, additional responsibilities included dealing with the mistakes of the Great War, as well as protecting humanity from itself as previously mentioned. The concept of mistakes, however, includes super mutants, as well as ghouls, and in many ways the Brotherhood has indiscriminately eradicated both due to what they represent: FEV mutation and lingering effects of the bombs falling. Protecting humanity from itself, however, places them directly at odds with the Enclave at seemingly all times, as the Enclave has no qualms with wiping out all life outside of its own ranks. It would mean Brotherhood war with the government's remnants within the 2240s and again in the 2270s. The Brotherhood, being a smaller organization at first, meant that they had to rely on local trade for many years, but for the most part utilized its own internal community to serve its mission. Seeking ways to continue this purpose, they did attempt different chapters in other areas, with an Appalachian branch under Elizabeth Taggarty, a friend of Roger Maxson from the Army, and a group sent towards the Mojave Wasteland. Taggarty's group would be wiped out by West Virginia's scorched population, while the Mojave Brotherhood would lose communication and go into hiding after heavy losses, battling the new California Republic. Years after the death of Roger Maxson, they'd send Star Paladin Owen Lyons in 2254 to the East Coast to achieve 3 objectives. 1. Explore the DC ruins for technology. 2. Assess and deal with a growing super mutant threat in the area. And 3. Seek out a lost airship in the ruins of Chicago. Lyons' group would never find the lost Brotherhood soldiers, but would land in DC and not only meet direct conflict with the Enclave and super mutants, but expand to surrounding areas. The East Coast Brotherhood, led by Lyons' group, would become known for several things: the discovery of Liberty Prime under the ruins of the Pentagon, raising Roger Maxson's surviving relative Arthur, but also a massive attack on the ruins of Pittsburgh that later became known as the Scourge. The Scourge was a single night of devastation that saw Lyons use the Brotherhood's advanced capabilities to wipe out the mutated and widely feral population of Pittsburgh. They'd slaughter countless people block by block, including those infected with troglodyte degeneration contagion, a unique disease in the area, but also anyone else that stood in their way. The operation, while considered successful, would later be a turning point for the Brotherhood, as Lyons would regret the devastation he caused, and seek to help more in the wasteland as opposed to only upholding the Brotherhood's beliefs. It would cause the East Coast group to split into 2 unique factions, with Henry Kasdan leading the Brotherhood outcasts for a time until after Lyons died, at which point Arthur Maxson had become the youngest elder ever in the history of the Brotherhood of Steel. Arthur, of course, ushers in a rather unique age for the group, one that bridges both the franchise's games and TV property. While the Brotherhood has existed over 200 years, by the time Arthur Maxson takes over, the group has a presence from both coasts of the United States, representing a quasi-religion armed with some of the best remaining technologies from Fallout's old world. While the original faction began its history as a militaristic organization with a moral code, they've remained somewhat pragmatic and largely rely on themselves, save for a chosen few who have proven their usefulness. Years later, however, with Eastern expansion, this friendlier, openly helpful to Wastelanders group is a stark contrast to the earliest held beliefs of the Brotherhood. And by the time Arthur Maxson takes over in 2282, it's clear that a more authoritarian Brotherhood has fully began to take shape. While we've pointed out that the Fallout 1 and 3 Brotherhood are more of a traditional good guy from a narrative standpoint, Fallout 4 features a group that's in much more of a gray area based on how Arthur Maxson positions the faction as its elder and supreme commander. Maxson's beliefs of the core values of the Brotherhood being lost during Lyon's time as Elder win over many within the DC group, and his instatement as its new leader is made possible by the West Coast High Elders, who seem to think they're still in charge, even given the tumultuous operations under Lyons that clashed with its previous charter. Arthur, however, truly believes that synth life must be eradicated in Boston after learning the android technology can be tracked, and regardless of anyone's thoughts on their sentience, they are in his mind a permanent symbol of mankind's hubris, and therefore must be destroyed. For this reason, it's a position that many share in the modern Fallout universe, but one that others think borders on fascism. Despite this fact, however, Brotherhood ideology often places them between humanity and threats to it, as Elder Lyons directly fought the Enclave in the DC area during the latter half of the 2200s, as well as Arthur Maxson directly challenging the Institute in the Boston Commonwealth, as the Institute was widely viewed as a morally questionable organization, not just by the Brotherhood of Steel, but by many more in the area. When stepping back and looking at Fallout's Brotherhood of Steel from a high level, the faction seems like it's had a fairly clear mission statement since day one, but a message that has slightly wavered over the 200 years since the group began. What could be brewing, however, is a bigger conflict internally amongst its ranks, and there are a few reasons for why this might already be happening. Throughout its history, numerous fractures have already occurred, initially as early as the exodus of the original chapter, but at several more points between the East Coast faction, including Washington, D.C., and a do-anything mentality for some of Arthur Maxson's ranks, even if the Supreme Commander doesn't sanction their actions. What looms, however, is the critical theological differences witnessed between the original West Coast group and the seemingly more successful detachment that became the East Coast faction, under Elder Lyons and eventually Arthur Maxson. By the 2290s, based on Amazon's Fallout series, the West Coast Brotherhood's control over the organization has drastically changed, as Elder Cleric Quintus of New California takes direct orders from Maxson himself. This comes after two major acquisitions from East Coast expansion, the discovery of Liberty Prime and the Prydwen airship, two critical tools the Brotherhood acquired and built to conquer its enemies. The Prydwen has also managed to arrive in New California during the events of Amazon's first season, but Elder Cleric Quintus seems motivated to potentially usurp Maxson's rule after acquiring cold fusion technology in Season 1's final showdown with the New California Republic. It's clear that the West Coast believes in a concept known as Eden, one mentioned by Maximus in the Season 1 finale, giving a far more religious undertone to the purpose of the organization than what was witnessed across Fallout 3 and 4's video games. We'll of course know more in the future, but for now, there might be more brewing between where the Brotherhood began and where it's going to head. And with that, we thank you for joining us as we explored the long history of the Brotherhood of Steel. Are there any facts we missed about the seemingly good guys of Fallout's world? Let us know in the comments. And for more content just like this video, check out our Fallout Stories playlist linked here, where you can find more weekly Fallout content. And until next time, pop culture nerds, keep on dissecting. This is Mark signing off.